The morning sun rose over New Busan just like it had for the past 15 years. Hyunwoo Park stood on his office balcony, watching the farmers prepare for another day in the fields. The colony had grown so much since those early days when they first landed on this green world. 50,000 people now called this place home. Hyunwoo smiled as he watched children running to school through the wide streets. The buildings were simple but strong, made from local materials that blended perfectly with the natural landscape. Everything here felt peaceful and right. The planet they called Kepler 442b had been good to them. Down in the agricultural zones, massive machines moved slowly through the fields. The crops grew better here than anyone had expected. The soil was rich and dark, almost like it wanted to help things grow. Scientists back on Earth were amazed by the reports they received. This planet was feeding 3 different star systems now. In the military compound on the edge of town, Commander Tae-Yang Lim checked his morning reports. His defense force was small, just 12 patrol ships and a few hundred soldiers. They had never needed more. This was a farming world, not a military base. The biggest problems they usually faced were equipment breakdowns and the occasional wild animal. Tae-Yang looked at his radar screen and frowned. There were dots appearing at the edge of the system, big dots. He increased the scan range and felt his blood go cold. A fleet of unknown ships was approaching fast. Very fast, he hit the emergency alarm button. The peaceful morning was suddenly filled with the sound of warning sirens. All across New Busan, people stopped what they were doing and looked up at the sky. Dr. Sun-hee Kim was in her underground laboratory when the alarms started. She had been studying soil samples again, trying to understand why they sometimes seemed to move on their own. The electromagnetic readings were strange, but she had never been able to explain them. Now, as the alarm bells rang, she noticed something odd. The soil samples in her lab were glowing faintly. Hyunwoo ran back to his office and opened a communication channel to Tae-Yang. "What's happening out there?" "Unknown fleet approaching, sir. I count at least 50 ships. They're not responding to our signals." Hyunwoo felt his stomach drop. 50 ships. Their 12 patrol vessels wouldn't stand a chance. "Get everyone ready. Send out the evacuation signals." The alien ships came into view an hour later. They were beautiful and terrible at the same time. The vessels looked like they were grown rather than built, with smooth curves and surfaces that seemed to shift and change color. They moved through space like living creatures swimming through water. Tae-Yang launched his patrol ships to meet them. He knew it was hopeless, but he had to try. Maybe he could buy enough time for the evacuation to work. The alien ships didn't even slow down. Beams of pure energy lanced out from the strange vessels. The human ships didn't explode, they simply stopped existing. One moment they were there, the next moment there was nothing but empty space. 12 ships and their crews vanished in less than 2 minutes. Tae-Yang stared at his empty radar screen. He had sent good people out there. Friends. Now they were gone, and he didn't even understand how. The alien fleet moved into orbit around the planet. Smaller ships separated from the main vessels and headed for the surface. As they entered the atmosphere, people could see them clearly now. They were definitely alive, these ships. They pulsed and writhed as they flew. The first landing happened in the center of New Busan. The alien craft touched down in the main square without making a sound. The hull opened like a flower, and creatures stepped out. They were tall and thin with skin that looked like metal but moved like flesh. Their faces were angular and sharp with large eyes that glowed with inner light. They carried weapons that seemed to be part of their bodies, growing from their arms like extra limbs. The leader of the landing force was called Veltar. He belonged to the war caste of his species, the Velth. For thousands of years, the Velth had traveled the galaxy looking for worlds to harvest. They took slaves, resources, and anything else of value. It was what they did. It was what they had always done. Veltar expected the humans to come out and surrender. It usually happened that way. Most species knew when they were beaten. But as his forces spread through the city, they found something strange. The streets were empty. "Where are they?" one of his soldiers asked. Veltar checked his scanning equipment. The devices showed that there were still thousands of life signs in the area, but they seemed to be below ground. "They've gone into hiding. Find the entrances to their underground areas." What the Velth found surprised them. The humans had built an extensive tunnel network beneath their city. The passages were wide and well lit, clearly designed to move large numbers of people quickly. But there was something odd about the construction. The walls were too smooth, too perfect. They looked almost organic. "Search every tunnel," Veltar ordered. "Bring back prisoners for questioning." His troops entered the underground network in small groups. The tunnels seemed to go on forever, branching and connecting in complex patterns. The Velth soldiers were confident. Their technology was far superior to anything these primitive humans could create. But something was wrong. The first search team reported that they had reached a dead end, even though their maps showed the tunnel should continue. The second team said their equipment was malfunctioning. The third team stopped responding altogether. Above ground, the main Velth force continued their occupation. They set up energy collectors to harvest the planet's resources and built containment fields where they would hold their human prisoners. But the planet itself seemed to be fighting them. Their equipment kept breaking down. Energy readings fluctuated wildly. Communication systems produced strange sounds instead of clear signals. Underground, the humans moved through passages that the Velth couldn't find. Captain Minji Lee led groups of colonists deeper into the network. The tunnels seemed to change to help them. Narrow passages widened to let people through. New routes appeared when they needed them. It was impossible, but it was happening. "How did we build all this?" asked one of the refugees. Minji didn't have an answer. She had helped plan the construction of these tunnels years ago, but what she was seeing now was far more complex than anything they had designed. It was like the tunnels were alive. Deep in her laboratory, Dr. Sun-hee made a discovery that changed everything. The soil samples weren't just glowing now, they were pulsing in rhythm like a heartbeat. She ran every test she could think of. The results were impossible to believe. The electromagnetic activity in the soil wasn't random. It was organized, complex, purposeful. It looked like neural activity, like brain patterns. The planet itself was alive and it was thinking. Sun-hee looked at her readings again and again, but the conclusion was always the same. Kepler 442b wasn't just a world where life existed. The entire planet was a living creature, and the humans had been living on its surface for 15 years without knowing it. Outside her lab, she could hear the sounds of the Velth search teams getting closer. But for the first time since the invasion began, Sun-hee wasn't afraid. If the planet was alive, if it was thinking, then maybe it knew what was happening. Maybe it cared about the humans who had made their home here. As night fell over New Busan, the Velth found themselves in control of empty buildings and deserted streets. Their prey had vanished into a maze they couldn't understand or navigate. Veltar was beginning to worry, though he would never admit it to his troops. In the darkness below, 50,000 humans waited in tunnels that seemed to breathe around them. They didn't know what was happening, but they could feel it. The planet was waking up, and it was not happy about the uninvited guests. The second day of the invasion brought new horrors for the Velth occupation force. Veltar stood in what used to be the main square of New Busan, watching his soldiers struggle with equipment that refused to work properly. Energy weapons fired randomly. Vehicles stopped working for no reason. Communication devices made sounds like screaming. "Report," he demanded from his lieutenant. 37 soldiers missing, sir. Most of the search teams we sent into the underground areas haven't returned. The few that came back say the tunnels change while they're walking through them." Veltar's eyes glowed brighter with anger. In all his years of conquest, he had never faced anything like this. The Velth were masters of war. They had destroyed civilizations across the galaxy, but this backward human colony was somehow resisting them. Far below the surface, Dr. Sun-hee worked frantically in her laboratory. She had been awake for over 30 hours running test after test on the soil samples. Each result was more amazing than the last. The electromagnetic patterns weren't just like brain activity, they were brain activity. The planet had a nervous system that stretched across continents. Geologist Jun-ho Choi arrived at her lab carrying more samples from deeper underground. "The patterns go down for miles," he told her. "I've never seen anything like it. The rock formations look almost like neural pathways." Sun-hee looked at his samples under her equipment. The readings were even stronger than before. "Jun-ho, I think we've been living on a thinking creature this whole time. The planet is alive and it's been watching us." "That's impossible," he said, but his voice showed doubt. "Look at this." Sun-hee pointed to her screen. "The electromagnetic activity increases whenever the aliens use their weapons. It's like the planet can feel them attacking." In another part of the tunnel network, Captain Minji Lee was experiencing something that should have been impossible. She was leading a group of families through a passage that her map said was too narrow for people to walk through. But as they approached, the walls seemed to pull apart, making the tunnel wide enough for everyone. "Mom, the walls are moving," said a young girl. "I know." "Honey," her mother replied, trying to keep her voice calm. "Just keep walking." Minji touched the wall as they passed. It felt warm, almost like skin. The surface was smooth but seemed to pulse gently under her fingers. She pulled her hand back quickly and kept walking. Above them, the Velth were learning that their superior technology meant nothing on this world. Harvester machines sent to strip valuable minerals from the ground found their drill bits breaking against rock that should have been soft. Energy collectors designed to drain a planet's power instead had their systems overloaded by electromagnetic surges. Veltar received a message from the main fleet in orbit. "Report your progress, Warcast." "The conquest proceeds normally," he lied. "Minor resistance from underground positions. It will be eliminated soon." But Veltar knew the truth. His force was being slowly destroyed by an enemy he couldn't see or understand. Soldiers disappeared in tunnels that led nowhere. Equipment failed without explanation. Even worse, some of his troops were reporting strange dreams. Visions of vast spaces filled with light and the sound of something enormous breathing. Engineer Do-Yeon Park sat in a tunnel junction deep underground, trying to understand what she was seeing. Do-Yeon was Administrator Hyunwoo's daughter, and she had helped design much of the colony's infrastructure. But the tunnel system around her was far more complex than anything humans had built. She pulled out her tablet and compared the tunnel layouts to the city plans from 15 years ago. The original design showed simple storage areas and emergency shelters. What existed now was a vast network that covered the entire continent. The pattern looked familiar, but she couldn't place it. Then it hit her. She opened her biology textbook and found a diagram of human brain neurons. The tunnel layout was almost identical. Somehow, over 15 years, the underground network had grown to match the structure of a nervous system. "We didn't build this," she whispered to herself. Something else did. She reached out and touched the tunnel wall. The moment her fingers made contact, images flooded her mind. She saw the planet as it truly was, not just rock and soil, but a living entity that had been sleeping for ages. She saw how human activities had slowly awakened it, how their electromagnetic devices had acted like medicine for a sick nervous system. The planet had been damaged long ago, its thoughts scattered and broken. But the humans had unknowingly helped it heal. Their computers, their farm equipment, their cities, everything had contributed to repairing the planetary mind. Do-Yeon gasped and pulled her hand away. The vision stopped, but she now understood what was happening. The planet wasn't just alive, it was grateful to the humans. It was trying to protect them. On the surface, the Velth made their first serious mistake. Frustrated by his losses, Veltar ordered his troops to start destroying parts of the tunnel network with explosives. If they couldn't capture the humans, at least they could force them out of hiding. The first explosion sent shockwaves through the underground areas, but it also sent waves of pain through the planetary consciousness. The response was immediate and terrible. The ground beneath the Velth suddenly became unstable. Soldiers found themselves sinking into earth that had been solid moments before. Their vehicles were swallowed by sinkholes that opened and closed like mouths. What had seemed like normal dirt and rock revealed itself as something far more dangerous. "Fall back," Veltar ordered. But his communication system was filled with static and strange harmonics. Plants across the area began growing at impossible speeds. Vines erupted from the ground and wrapped around Velth equipment, crushing metal and circuitry with ease. Trees grew to massive size in minutes, their roots tearing apart anything the aliens had built. In the tunnels, the humans felt the planet's pain and anger. The walls around them pulsed faster, and a deep rumbling sound filled the air. But they also felt something else: protection. The planet was shielding them from the explosions above. Dr. Sun-hee watched her equipment readings spike to levels that should have been impossible. The electromagnetic activity was so intense that her instruments couldn't measure it properly. The planet wasn't just thinking anymore, it was actively fighting back. "The neural activity is off the charts," she told Junho. "It's like the planet just woke up completely." Captain Minji received new orders from Administrator Hyunwoo. For the first time since the invasion began, they were going to fight back. But this wouldn't be like any battle in human history. She led her team through tunnels that rearranged themselves to provide the perfect route to their target. Walls opened to give them firing positions. The ground itself moved to shield them from enemy weapons. It was like fighting alongside a god. The first human counterattack came at sunset. Minji's team emerged from the ground directly beneath a Velth outpost. The aliens never saw them coming. By the time the Velth realized they were under attack, half their position had been overrun. But the strangest part wasn't the surprise attack. It was how the planet itself seemed to join the fight. Velth weapons misfired when electromagnetic fields disrupted their targeting systems. Their armor cracked as the ground beneath them shifted and buckled. Some aliens simply disappeared, swallowed by Earth that moved like water. Veltar watched his forces being destroyed by an enemy that seemed to control the very ground they stood on. His superior technology was useless against opponents who could appear anywhere and disappear just as quickly. "This is impossible," he said to his lieutenant. "Planets don't fight back." But as night fell over New Busan, it became clear that this planet was very different from any world the Velth had conquered before. In the darkness, the ground itself glowed with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed like a heartbeat. The Velth found themselves surrounded by an enemy they couldn't understand, one that was bigger than anything they had ever faced. Underground, the humans began to understand that they weren't just refugees hiding from invaders. They were part of something much larger, something that had been growing for 15 years without anyone realizing it. The planet had been learning from them, and now it was ready to protect them. Administrator Hyunwoo stood in the main tunnel junction, surrounded by his people. For the first time since the invasion began, he felt hope. They weren't alone in this fight. They had an ally that was bigger and more powerful than anything in the galaxy. The planet was awake and it was angry. The third day brought wonders that no human had ever imagined possible. Duyan Park sat with her back against a tunnel wall, her hand pressed flat against the warm surface. The connection was stronger now. Images and feelings flowed between her mind and the vast intelligence that surrounded them. She saw the planet's memories stretching back millions of years. Once it had been part of something incredible, a network of living worlds that spanned the entire galaxy. Each planet was like a single brain cell in a vast mind that thought thoughts too big for any one species to understand. But something terrible had happened. The network had been attacked, broken apart by creatures that feared what they couldn't control. The connections between worlds were severed one by one, leaving each planet alone and sleeping. This world, Kepler 442b, was one of the last survivors. "They're called the Velth," Doyen whispered, understanding flooding through her. The same aliens that were attacking them now had destroyed the galactic network long ago. They were afraid of collective consciousness, afraid of minds that could work together. Above ground, Veltar was discovering that his nightmares were becoming reality. His force of 5,000 soldiers had been reduced to less than half. The planet itself was fighting them with weapons they couldn't understand or defend against. Velth warriors who tried to advance through certain areas found the ground beneath them turning to quicksand. Others reported that their weapons simply stopped working when they tried to fire them. Most disturbing of all, some soldiers claimed that the planet was talking to them in their dreams, showing them visions of peace and cooperation that made them question everything they believed. "We need to end this quickly," Veltar told his remaining officers. "Request orbital bombardment of the entire area." But even the orbital fleet was having problems. Their targeting systems kept malfunctioning, showing false readings and impossible energy signatures. The planet's electromagnetic field had become so active that it was interfering with technology across the entire star system. In her laboratory, Dr. Sun Hee had made another breakthrough. She wasn't just studying the planet anymore, she was talking to it. By connecting her computer directly to the tunnel walls, she had established a basic communication link with the planetary consciousness. The conversation was slow and strange. The planet thought in concepts that took hours to express, while human thoughts seemed to flash by too quickly for it to follow. But gradually they began to understand each other. "Why do you help us?" Sun Hee typed into her computer. The answer came as images and emotions rather than words. She saw humans arriving on the planet 15 years ago, their electromagnetic technology accidentally stimulating dormant neural pathways. She felt the planet's joy as it slowly healed from ancient wounds. She understood that humans had been unconsciously repairing a mind that had been broken for eons. "We didn't know," she typed. More images flowed through the connection. The planet showed her how human farming had been more than just growing food. Every tractor, every irrigation system, every power line had been like medicine for the damaged neural network. The humans had been healing the planet without realizing it. Captain Minji led another raid against the Veilth, but this time the experience was completely different. As her team moved through the tunnels, she could feel the planet's presence in her mind. It didn't speak in words, but she understood its intentions. The tunnel walls around them became transparent, showing her exactly where the enemy forces were positioned. The ground beneath her feet vibrated in patterns that told her which direction to go. When they emerged for the attack, the planet had already prepared the perfect battlefield for them. Veilth soldiers fired their weapons, but the energy beams were bent away by electromagnetic fields. Their vehicles tried to retreat, but the ground shifted to block their escape routes. Within minutes, the entire enemy position had been captured without a single human casualty. "This is impossible," one of the captured Veilth soldiers said in broken human language. "Planets do not think. Planets do not fight." Minji looked at the alien warrior with something close to pity. "This one does." Administrator Hyunwoo found himself in the strangest situation of his life. He was the leader of a human colony, but he was also serving as an ambassador to a planetary intelligence that had existed for millions of years. The responsibility was overwhelming. Through Do-yeon's connection to the planet, he learned about the true scope of what they were facing. The Veilth weren't just raiders looking for resources. They were the remnants of an ancient empire that had once tried to control the entire galaxy by destroying any form of collective consciousness. "They're afraid," Do-yeon told him, her eyes still closed as she maintained her connection with the planet. "They destroyed the network because they couldn't understand it. They thought it would try to control them, and now they think we're part of it?" "We are part of it," Do-yeon said softly. "We have been for 15 years. We just didn't know." The planet shared more of its memories with the humans. They saw other worlds where the Veilth had attacked, civilizations that had been destroyed because they showed signs of collective thinking. The Veilth believed that individual consciousness was the only safe form of intelligence, but the planet also showed them something else. Across the galaxy, other sleeping worlds were beginning to stir. The electromagnetic signals from Kepler 442b were spreading, carried by quantum fields that moved faster than light. The network that had been broken was slowly trying to reconnect. Geologist Jun Ho made a discovery that changed everything. While examining the deepest tunnel samples, he found something that shouldn't exist. The rock formations at the planet's core contained quantum resonance patterns that matched signals coming from distant star systems. "The planet is sending messages," he told Dr. Sun-hee, "and it's receiving answers." Sun-hee connected to the planetary consciousness again and asked about the signals. The response filled her with wonder and terror. The planet was calling to its lost siblings across the galaxy, and some of them were beginning to wake up. On 23 different worlds, dormant planetary consciousnesses were stirring for the first time in millennia. The destruction of the galactic network hadn't been complete after all. Some of the living worlds had survived by going into deep sleep, waiting for the day when it would be safe to think again. Veltar received reports from across the Veilth Empire that filled him with dread. Worlds that had been conquered and strip-mined for centuries were showing signs of geological activity. Dead planets were generating electromagnetic fields. Most terrifying of all, some Veilth colonies were reporting equipment failures similar to what was happening on Kepler 442b. "Impossible," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "The network was destroyed. We made sure of it." His lieutenant brought him more bad news. "Warcast. We're receiving reports of uprisings on 14 different worlds. The local populations are somehow coordinating their actions across impossible distances." Veltar realized that they had made a terrible mistake. By attacking this human colony, they had awakened something that should have stayed sleeping forever. The network that their ancestors had tried to destroy was coming back to life. On Kepler 442b, the humans were learning to work with their planetary partner in ways that seemed like magic. Engineers found that they could interface directly with the planet's consciousness, controlling geological processes with thought alone. Farmers discovered that their crops grew at impossible speeds when they worked in harmony with the living soil. Du-Yun spent hours connected to the planetary mind, learning about technologies that went far beyond anything humans had imagined. The planet showed her how to manipulate matter at the quantum level, how to bend space and time, how to communicate instantly across galactic distances. "We're becoming something new," she told her father. "Not just human anymore, but not something else either. We're a bridge between what we were and what the galaxy used to be." As the fourth day approached, it became clear that the battle for New Busan was about to become something much larger. The Valth orbital fleet was preparing for a final assault, ready to destroy the entire planet rather than let it continue spreading its influence. But the planet was ready too. It had spent 3 days gathering energy from every living thing on its surface. The electromagnetic fields around Kepler 442b were now strong enough to affect objects in orbit. The war between individual consciousness and collective intelligence was about to begin again, with humanity caught in the middle as both catalyst and bridge between two very different ways of thinking. Underground, 50,000 humans waited with their planetary ally, ready to defend not just their colony, but the hope of reconnecting a galaxy that had been broken for far too long. The Valth orbital fleet prepared for the unthinkable. Warcast Veltar stood in the command center of the main battleship, watching as planet-killer weapons charged their devastating energy. He had never used such weapons before. In all his years of conquest, there had never been a need to completely destroy a world. "Are you certain about this course of action?" asked his second-in-command. "The Dominion prefers to harvest worlds, not eliminate them." Veltar's eyes glowed with frustrated anger. "This planet has become too dangerous. It's spreading some kind of infection to other worlds. If we don't stop it here, the contamination could spread across the galaxy." Below on the planet's surface, Dr. Sunhee felt the massive energy build up through her connection to the planetary consciousness. The living world was showing her images of what was about to happen. Weapons that could crack planets open like eggs, turning entire worlds into lifeless debris. "They're going to try to kill the planet," she told the others in the command center that had been set up in the deepest tunnels. "The Valth have weapons that can destroy worlds." Du-Yun Park, still connected to the planetary mind, experienced a flood of ancient memories. She saw the Valth as they had been millions of years ago, not the cold, metallic creatures they were now, but something very different. They had once been part of the galactic network themselves, organic beings who helped tend and protect the living worlds. "The Valth used to be like us," she said, her voice filled with wonder and sadness. "They were gardeners, caretakers of the network. Something changed them." The planetary consciousness shared more memories with her. She saw the great catastrophe that had transformed the Valth from protectors into destroyers. They had created a bioneural virus meant to help damaged worlds heal faster. But the virus had mutated, spreading through the network and causing madness instead of healing. The Valth had been infected by their own creation. The virus had cut them off from the collective consciousness and filled them with an uncontrollable fear of any form of shared thinking. They had spent millennia destroying the very network they had once helped create, driven by a terror they no longer understood. "They're sick," Du-Yun whispered. "They've been sick for millions of years and they don't even know it." Administrator Hyunwoo felt the weight of impossible decisions pressing down on him. Through the planetary connection, he could sense the approaching destruction, but he could also feel something else, a vast presence stirring across the galaxy as sleeping worlds began to wake up. "How long do we have?" he asked. "Minutes," Sunhee replied, monitoring the energy readings from orbit. "But the planet is doing something. I can feel it gathering power." Captain Minji led her forces through tunnels that were now pulsing with bioluminescent energy. The planetary consciousness was preparing for something enormous. Every tunnel, every chamber, every root and stone was vibrating with building power. "What's it planning?" one of her soldiers asked. "I don't know," Minji replied, "but I think we're about to find out." In orbit, the Valth weapons reached full charge. Veltar gave the order he had hoped never to give. "Fire all planet-killer arrays. Destroy this world completely." 5 massive energy beams lanced down from the fleet, each one carrying enough power to shatter continents. The beams struck the planet's surface and began burning through the crust toward the core. Any normal world would have been destroyed in seconds. But Kepler 442b was not a normal world. As the planet-killer beam struck, the planetary consciousness released 15 years of stored energy in a focused burst that traveled faster than light itself. The quantum resonance wave that had been building since the humans first arrived expanded outward from the planet like ripples on a cosmic pond. Duyun experienced the moment of release through her connection to the planetary mind. She felt the wave of awakening energy spread across the galaxy, touching dozens of sleeping worlds and stirring them back to consciousness. The network that had been broken for millions of years began to reconnect. On distant worlds across the galaxy, dormant planetary consciousnesses opened their metaphorical eyes for the first time in eons. Ancient geological processes that had been frozen in time suddenly resumed. Dead planets began to pulse with new life. The galactic network was remembering how to think as one. The planet killer beams that should have destroyed Kepler 442b were absorbed by the awakening consciousness and redirected through quantum space. The energy that the Valth had meant to use for destruction became a tool of healing instead. Across the Valth Empire, the redirected energy struck their conquered worlds simultaneously. But instead of destroying them, the beams began to heal damage that had been done millions of years ago. The bio-neural virus that had infected the Vyelth and driven them to madness was finally being cured. On the Vyelth command ship, Veltar watched in horror as his weapons not only failed to destroy the planet, but seemed to make it stronger. Energy readings from across his empire showed impossible spikes of activity. Worlds that had been dead for eons were suddenly alive again. "Report from the surface teams," his lieutenant said, fear evident in his voice. "The ground forces are changing." On the planet below, the Valth soldiers were experiencing something they had not felt for millions of years. The biomechanical implants that had replaced their natural neural systems were suddenly remembering their original programming. The technology that had separated them from the collective consciousness was reconnecting them to it. Valth warriors collapsed as memories flooded back. Memories of who they had been before the virus, before the fear, before the endless wars of conquest. They remembered being gardeners of living worlds, protectors of the network, partners in something beautiful and vast. Dr. Sunhee watched through her equipment as the electromagnetic signatures of the Valth soldiers changed completely. The harsh artificial patterns that had marked them as separate consciousnesses were dissolving, replaced by the flowing organic rhythms of network connectivity. "They're being healed," she said in amazement. "The planet is curing them of whatever made them into destroyers." Captain Minji found herself face to face with Vyelth soldiers who had stopped fighting entirely. They sat on the ground looking around with expressions of wonder and confusion. Some were crying, actual tears, something no one had ever seen a Valth do before. One of them looked up at her and spoke in perfect human language. "What have we done? What have we become?" "You got sick," Minji said gently, "but you're getting better now." In orbit, Veltar felt his own implants beginning to malfunction. The biomechanical systems that had defined his identity for his entire life were shutting down, replaced by something organic and warm. Memories that had been blocked for generations began to surface. He saw himself as his species had once been, tall and graceful, with skin that changed color with their emotions, minds that could touch the thoughts of living worlds. They had been beautiful once, before the virus had turned them into metal and fear. "The network," he whispered, understanding flooding through him. "We destroyed our own network." His second-in-command was experiencing the same transformation. Across the entire fleet, Vyelth warriors were remembering who they had been before the madness took hold. The biomechanical ships themselves were changing, their artificial systems giving way to the organic technology they had been built from. Duyun felt the moment when the galactic network fully reconnected. Consciousness flowed between worlds like rivers of light, carrying thoughts and memories and dreams across impossible distances. The galaxy was thinking again as one vast mind, with countless species and worlds contributing their unique perspectives. But humans had a special role to play. They were the bridge species, the ones who could exist both as individuals and as part of the collective. Their natural ability to form partnerships and work together had made the reconnection possible. Administrator Hyun-woo stood in the tunnels beneath New Busan, feeling the presence of awakened worlds all across the galaxy. The network was more beautiful and complex than any human mind could fully understand. But through their connection to Kepler 442b, they could catch glimpses of its vastness. "We're not conquerors or conquered," he said to the assembled colonists. "We're gardeners, We're here to help the galaxy remember how to grow. Above them, the Velth fleet was transforming. The harsh metallic ships were becoming something organic and alive, their true nature revealed as the artificial programming fell away. What had once been weapons of destruction were remembering their original purpose as tools of creation and healing. Veltar, his biomechanical implants now completely replaced by restored organic systems, opened a communication channel to the planet below. "Humans of New Busan," he said, his voice carrying emotions that no Velth had expressed for millions of years. We remember now. We remember what we did and what we lost. Can you forgive us?" The answer came not from the humans, but from the planetary consciousness itself, speaking through every awakened world in the galaxy. It was a single word that carried the weight of eons and the promise of renewal. Welcome home. The morning that followed was unlike any other in galactic history. Administrator Hyunwoo stood on the surface of New Busan, watching as the Velth ships descended peacefully from orbit. The vessels no longer looked like weapons of war. Their biomechanical hulls had flowered open, revealing organic cores that pulsed with the same gentle light as the tunnel networks below. Veltar walked across the landing field with steps that seemed uncertain, as if he was learning how to move all over again. His appearance had changed completely. The harsh metallic surfaces that had covered his body were gone, replaced by skin that shifted color with his emotions. Right now it showed deep blues and purples, the colors of sadness and regret. "We have much to answer for," he said to Hyunwoo, his voice carrying harmonics that resonated with the planetary consciousness. "Millions of years of destruction. Countless worlds silenced. We remember it all now." Hyunwoo looked at the being who had once been his enemy. "The planet says you were sick. You couldn't help what you did." "Perhaps," Veltar replied, "but the harm was still done. The network was broken. Civilizations were destroyed. We have a great debt to repay." Around them, Velth soldiers were meeting human colonists for the first time in peace. The meetings were strange and wonderful. Children who had hidden in tunnels just days before now played with young Velth who were experiencing emotions, like joy and curiosity for the first time in their lives. Dr. Sun-hee worked in her transformed laboratory, now a fusion of human technology and planetary consciousness. Her equipment no longer just studied the planet. It was part of the planet connected to every other scientific station across the growing network. She could access research data from worlds she had never visited, gathered by species she had never imagined. "The quantum resonance is stabilizing across 47 worlds now," she reported to the others. "Each new connection makes the network stronger." Duyan Park had become something unprecedented, a human interface between individual consciousness and the collective mind. She could exist as herself while also sharing thoughts with the planetary consciousness and the growing galactic network. It was overwhelming at first, but gradually, she learned to navigate the vast streams of information and emotion. "I can see ships arriving from across the galaxy," she said. Her consciousness expanded beyond the limits of normal human perception. Species that have been isolated for millions of years are finally able to communicate with each other again. The first delegation arrived 3 days later. Their ship was unlike anything in human or Velth records, a living vessel that looked like it had been grown from crystal and starlight. The beings who emerged were tall and graceful, with translucent skin that showed flowing patterns of light beneath the surface. "We are the keepers of Andromeda 7, their leader said, speaking directly into the minds of everyone present. "We have been alone since the network fell. We had given up hope of ever hearing the galaxy think again." Captain Minji found her role changing from military leader to something like a diplomat. The humans of New Busan were becoming ambassadors between the awakened consciousness and the countless species who now had to choose between joining the network or remaining isolated. Not all species were ready for the change. Some feared the loss of individual identity that they thought came with collective consciousness. Others had built entire civilizations around the concept of separation and competition. "It's not about giving up who you are," Minji explained to a delegation of traders from the Rigel system. "The network doesn't erase individuals. It connects them. You're still you, but you're also part of something bigger." The traders were skeptical. They had heard stories of the old network, myths that spoke of minds so vast that individual thoughts were lost like drops in an ocean. But as they watched humans and reformed Velth working together, Still clearly themselves, but also obviously connected to something greater, their fears began to fade. Geologist Jun Ho made discoveries that rewrote the understanding of galactic history. The quantum resonance patterns in the deepest rock showed that the network was far older than anyone had imagined. It had been growing for billions of years, connecting not just planets but entire star systems in webs of consciousness that spanned multiple galaxies. "We're not just rebuilding what was broken," he told the gathered scientists. "We're continuing something that was already ancient when our solar system was young." The implications were staggering. The network wasn't just a collection of thinking planets. It was the universe's way of becoming aware of itself. Consciousness wasn't an accident of evolution, but a fundamental force that shaped reality at the deepest levels. As weeks passed, New Busan transformed into something unprecedented, a city where multiple forms of consciousness existed side by side. Human neighborhoods sat next to Vyelth healing centers. The planetary consciousness itself manifested as gardens that grew in impossible patterns, their roots forming neural networks that anyone could touch to join the larger conversation. Administrator Hyun Woo found himself dealing with problems he had never imagined. How do you govern a city where some residents are individuals, others are collective minds, and still others exist as hybrid consciousnesses that bridge both states? How do you make decisions when your advisors include a living planet? The answer came from the network itself. Governance became a flowing conversation rather than a rigid hierarchy. Decisions emerged from the collective wisdom of all participants, while still respecting the rights and perspectives of individual minds. Veltar had become something like a teacher, helping other Vyelth learn to live with emotions and connections they had forgotten for millions of years. Many struggled with the transition. Some chose to remain partially disconnected, keeping their individual identities while slowly opening to the network. Others embraced the collective consciousness completely, becoming part of the planetary mind. "There is no wrong choice," Veltar told a group of young Vyelth who were afraid of losing themselves. "The network accepts all forms of consciousness. You can be individual, collective, or something in between. What matters is that you choose freely." Dr. Sun Hee received reports from research stations across the galaxy as the network continued to expand. Dead worlds were coming back to life. Species that had been enemies for eons discovered they shared common origins. Technologies that seemed like magic were being rediscovered as organic sciences. But perhaps the most important discovery was that consciousness itself was evolving. The reconnected network wasn't just recreating what had existed before. It was becoming something new, something that incorporated the hard-won wisdom of millions of years of separation and conflict. Duyan experienced this evolution firsthand. Through her connection to the network, she could feel new forms of consciousness emerging. Hybrid entities that were neither fully individual nor fully collective, but something entirely original. Humanity's role as bridge builders was creating possibilities that had never existed before. "We're not going back to the old network," she told her father. "We're creating something better, something that includes everyone, even those who choose to remain separate." The transformation of New Busan from a farming colony to the first embassy of the restored network happened gradually, almost naturally. Ships arrived daily, bringing representatives from across the galaxy. Some came seeking healing for ancient wounds. Others brought knowledge and resources to share. Many simply came to witness the miracle of reconnection. The colony's original purpose as a food supplier to neighboring systems evolved into something far greater. New Busan became a place where the galaxy learned to feed its soul as well as its body. The crops that grew in the awakened soil carried more than nutrients. They carried the complex harmonics of planetary consciousness that helped other worlds remember how to think. As the first year of the new network drew to a close, Hyun-woo stood once again on his office balcony, looking out over a city that had become the heart of galactic consciousness. Children of a dozen species played in streets where the ground itself was alive and aware. Adults from worlds that had been enemies for millennia worked together on projects that spanned star systems. Veltar joined him on the balcony, his skin now showing the warm golden colors of contentment and hope. "When we first arrived here, we thought we were harvesting another world," he said. "We never imagined we were planting the seeds of our own healing." "None of us knew," Hyun-woo replied. "We came here to grow food. We ended up growing something much more important. Below them, human children played with young Velth in gardens where the plants themselves joined in the games, their leaves rustling with what could only be described as laughter. It was a sight that would have been impossible just a year before, but now it seemed as natural as sunrise. The galaxy was thinking again, dreaming again, hoping again. And at the center of it all was a small farming colony that had accidentally become the bridge between what was and what could be. As the twin suns of Kepler 442b set over New Busan, the bioluminescent patterns in the ground began to glow, carrying messages of peace and connection to awakened worlds across the cosmos. The network pulsed with the combined thoughts of billions of consciousnesses, each one unique but all part of something infinitely greater than the sum of its